What's up, guys? Who needs me here, coming at you with another retro deck profile. Today we're going to be looking at Jeff Jones's Airblade controlled deck that made top 8 at Shonen Jump St. Louis. This is the claim to fame for my area. I'm from St. Louis, so I wanted to eventually do a deck from Shonen Jump St. Louis. An infamous deck. This is not the turbo build. I'm not a fan of, play defusion and OTK your opponent, things like this and dad return are not really my thing, but I do enjoy the control build. We get to play, a bunch of cool trap cards and things like that, and the sideboard's pretty interesting. So let's get right into the list here. To start it off, we have the 3 Airblades or the 3 Stratos. We can search each other, we can flip call or premium, things like that to pop cards, especially in the end phase is really cool. Or you can summon Stratos and they run it over, and you could summon Stratos, or if they don't run over your Stratos and they set a monster, and you can end phase call another Stratos in the graveyard and pop their back row after they just set. It's kind of cool play. And then the end of the chain for the one of Wildheart. This is your unaffected by traps, which is the turbo build does not play traps. This card is not really great in that aspect, but it is really good in decks that, like the Mirror, where you're playing the control build, or anything that sets a lot of cards, a lot of anti-meta warrior, things like that. We do also play a big warrior package. Along with these 4, we have the 2 Don Zaloogs, and we have the 2 Exiled. We play a lot of back row and things like that, to where we can simplify game states and then utilize Don Zaloog to pick cards out of our opponent's hand so that they don't have all of those combo pieces, which is why I really like this deck, where if your opponent's setting up for a big 2 or 3 card, either Monster Gate or something like that, and they're setting up for that defusion play, the fact that we can, essentially try and snipe one of the pieces out of their hand is really cool. Kind of a staple thing of the format. 3 Cyber Dragons. There was some machine OTK there as well. That was also in the top 8. So this card was seeing a lot of play in that deck and things like this. So, but I would just, the fact that your opponent goes, Stratos, and you go Cyber Dragon over the Stratos, and then summon your Stratos in your cycle. You're just kind of, doing your gadget cycle. Interesting to see he just also opted to play 3 Hydrogeddon. The fact that Stratos is 18 and this is only 16, and we're not playing Shrink or anything like that, is really interesting. But this card does, eat stuff like Diamond Dude in that turbo build, so you can really put a lot of pressure on your opponent if they're using Diamond Dude to set up as opposed to Stratos. So that is an interaction. And then some other one of things. We have our one of Moth. One of Breaker. This is really important for getting rid of Defisher Macro and next stuff in that matchup. This deck isn't really super susceptible to that, which is really nice. Hydrogeddon unfortunately does lose out in that regard. And then again, one Spear Reaper, again, more ways to just kind of pick cards out of our opponents to stall their Hydrogeddons if they're playing it. Just things like that. So that is all of the monsters here. Move on to the spell lineup. We have our 2 Rotas. Again, a way to get into that whole warrior package. Just get through our deck, get to our Stratos, and get moving. It's also really cool that we have the Don Zaloogs and the Exiled Force, so if we need spot removal for a monster, we have that. Or if we're in a position to Cyber Dragon and then get rid of their monster, and then we could get a Don Zaloog and just start picking cards out of their hand. Another way we could do that is we have 3 Smashing Grounds. If you want to smashing their monster and then grab that Zaloog and just start poking, or grab that Spear Reaper and start poking. So this is a really good way to, again, simplify the game state. That's really what this deck wants to do, is keep as many monsters off your opponent's side of the board as possible, and then continue to just jab away at their resources. 1 Pot of Avarice to recycle our monsters, to get that Stratos line going. Got that 3rd Stratos in your hand, put the other 2 back. Go +1. Graceful Charity, staple draw card. Preemie. And Knock. It's interesting to see you play Knock because there's not a ton of sets. Moth's at 1, so we're not seeing Moth at more than 1, so this is an interesting choice, but I guess it is kind of one of those out of nowheres, oh, you play that card. And then we have a little bit of back row removal here. We have our 1 of Heavy and our also 1 of MST. And we will move on to the trap lineup here. 1 Call of the Haunted. This is really cool, battle phase tricks and things like that, to where we can flip this to utilize our Stratoses, or utilize picking cards out of our opponent's hand with Zaloog or things like that. Or if we need to get rid of a monster that they have that they think they're set with, we could call Exiled Force. To be able to use Exiled Force multiple times in the same game is really good. So the recycling of your graveyard monsters is really important. 3 Bottomless. This is really cool. I would like this to getting rid of the Stratos. Yeah, your opponent gets the cycle going, but you can get that off the board. This card stops Hydrogeddon, and then, of course, the Defusion play. That's just so important to be able to stop that, to have a mass card for Defusion. A lot of times, if they don't get the Jinzo, like, they're going to have a really hard time dealing with this card. But the deck really does want to try and get Jinzo before it does anything. So that's what you're basically trying to prevent that from happening as well. We have, for battle traps, we have 1 Mirror Force, the blowout one, and then we have 3 Sakus. It's cool to see that he opted to go with 3 Sakuretsu Armor. This card is really cool. I'm a big fan of this card. Just, again, simplified game state, 1 from removal, protect your monsters, protect your Zaloogs, and just start, going in and getting rid of stuff. This deck plays a lot like anti-meta gadgets would in like Perfect Circle format or something like that, where you're just trying to, keep your hand advantage up while using some of your other monsters to make sure they can't do as much. We have 1 Torrential Tribute. This is pretty staple here. Again, mass clearance. Even decks that were playing, that weren't really playing traps, they might play like 1 or 2. This is definitely one of the trap cards that they would play. And then, this is really important for this, 3 Solemn Judgment. We want to stop Defusion, and the fact that this card says no to that card is really important. So not only can we stop, if they want to tribute someone for Jinzo or something like that, we're able to stop that with a Mali player, things of that nature, but we also have the ability to stop Defusion, which is just the push button win card for that deck, and it is kind of one-track mind for that deck. We can also stop, important things like Macrocosmos for that and D-Fisher for the Macro Monarch deck. It's not that card hurts us, it's that it helps them because they rely so heavily on DD Survivor. So the ability to stop that card from being able to come back every turn, it's like the Treeborn Frog, to where it's infinite tribute fodder, and they're just going to be, getting Festaloses off like crazy in Sideboard. So we don't want that to happen. And we will move on to the sideboard here. We have just 5 monsters. We have 2 copies of Spy here. This is really cool against the macro deck because this is 2000s bigger than Survivor. It's bigger than Stratos too, which is important. So that's kind of really cool. But it's more important because the macro, because we're playing 2 copies of Mobius. This is our tribute fodder back here, and this is what we're tribute summoning for here. The idea that we can get rid of their reliant back row and just win the game that way. And then being 24. And then the last monster is 1 Morphing Jar. It's interesting to see you decided not to main this, but because other decks are so much faster, this is good against slower paced decks and things like that. But you don't want to put a bunch of stuff in their graveyard and then just let that deck refuel. So I'm assuming that's the same logic. This is something that I'm really curious about. I saw this in the sideboard for a lot of decks, but 1 Confiscation. The idea that this is not in the main is really, really unusual to me, and I'm not really too sure why it's not in the main board, but I'm guessing because you could, I don't know, maybe you're afraid the only cards you're going to hit after turn 1 are Mali, or just things that they want in their graveyard, or that they can use, like a Phoenix Blade or something like that for their infinite discard, because they do play that card. So that is pretty interesting. This is my favorite side deck card in the side deck here. We have 3 Curse Seal of the Forbidden Spell. Those of you who don't know what this does, you have to discard a spell to activate it, but your opponent can... it negates a spell, but your opponent cannot activate another copy for the rest of the game. So if you hit Defusion with this, it's absolutely devastating because you have disrupted probably their biggest win condition. So if they don't have their big win con, that deck has a really hard time going. So the fact that there's 3 of this in the sideboard is really cool. But you have to discard a spell, and we don't play a ton, so you probably would side in the Confiscation here just to give your spell count just a little bit higher. The last few cards here, we have 3 copies of Trap Dustshoot to just like take a look at our opponent's hand and return problem cards. This is really, really good against the macro Monarch matchup. And then to combo with it, though, we have 3 copies of a Mind Crush. If we're able to, because we're seeing 3 and 3, and if you do decide to put all 6 in here, the idea of making your opponent go, seeing your opponent's hand, getting rid of something that's like a monster that's important, then getting rid of another key card out of their hand is absolutely huge. So, plus this card stops the Stratos loop. So if they go Stratos for Stratos and you Mind Crush that Stratos out of their hand, they're losing that loop, and if that's their like only like go-to play there, it's really good. And then Trap Dustshoot, obviously just being able to see your opponent's hand is super important, and because of Stratos, hand sizes are going to be fairly big, so you'll be able to get this card off more often. There will be some duels in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe for more retro format content, and thanks for watching, guys.